Bang! Neeves Knives. I'm Jared, and we have the Kizer Justice Review. Now, this one kind of surprised me because it really, people had told me about it. A couple people said, how great it was, but it really wasn't on my radar. And then once I got it, MOJAVE Outdoors sent it to me. Shout out to MOJAVE Outdoors. They will be linked below. I have a 10% discount code with them. So Neeves Knives is the discount code. And then, I'm going to link as much as I can below. So, but until they sent it to me, this is actually a pretty impressive knife. I consider this definitely a work knife. It is a larger size knife, but man, it's pretty awesome. Let's get right into it. So I do have two options here. I have the one with the coated and semi-serrated blade. Now, the biggest difference between these two is the non-coated blade is going to be a little more drop shutty at first. This one will just take a little longer to break in. I'm not saying it's not drop shutty or anything. It's very smooth, but the coated blade is going to need a little bit more break-in time. This one came stupid smooth out of the box. Now, also the serrations. I do like how they stone washed the coating though. So you're not going to have to worry about scratches or anything like that, especially for a work knife. Now, the serrations, what are those going to be good for? So serrations are good for rope and things like that because you can hook it and it acts like a saw kind of. They don't give you a lot here, but just enough that if you did have rope, twine, paracord, a belt, things like that, you can snag it on the serrations, yank, and then the teeth will cut into the material really hard. And even if you use the rest of the blade to do the cutting, this will basically make a giant wound into the material for the rest of the blade to finish off. So there's also a lot of other ways and things you can do with serrations. But in some cases, serrations work better than, a regular edge. Now, we're also going to talk about these little notches up here that I've shown in a few Kizer videos where I've noticed some of the most smoothest Kizers that I've ever felt had this same thing in common. So I think I have a good opinion on why I think that is, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. But first, let's talk about this action because heavy detent, nice heavy detent. I mean, you can hear it suck right back into there. The thumb studs, very strong detent. This thing kicks like a horse. It's just the strong detent makes that blade snap out there real hard, whether you're using the thumb studs or the flipper tab. And then when you unlock it, it is a liner lock, and it does have great access to the liner. The detent vault is right there very early, so you're always past the detent, but stupid smooth. It is very, very smooth. Like I said, this one is smoother than the coated blade, and it almost feels like it's just almost, I mean, I don't want to say like Shirogorov style, but it's way smoother than you would think this knife is. Let me just say that. It is very smooth. Like if you just let it sit there, like with just the tiniest bit of influence, like if I just sit it there, no, it's not falling, but a little bit of influence and the thing just drops straight down. It is semi-guillotine-ish. It's very, very close to fall shut action. Now, like I said, the detent is nice and heavy. So the flipper tab is jimped, and it is kind of an odd shaped flipper tab, but with the pivot system and the detent strength, it works really good. It kicks. Now, when it's open, it does have like a weird shape right here. We'll get into that here in just a second. But for the action, man, this thing, it does great action. Let's just say that. Great action. Nice big stop pin. It is an overbuilt knife, and that's why I call it a work knife, because it is definitely overbuilt. We have a nice big stainless steel backspacer here. It does have a glass breaker right here, but one good thing about this glass breaker is it never gets in the way. I don't feel it in my palm at all. because just the way it is, like, it's just not uncomfortable. Even on my thumb, it's not uncomfortable. So it's never in the way. So in that case, I don't mind it. If it was pokey, I would really mind it, but it's not bad at all. Now, you do have jimping in a bunch of places, so lots of grip. The ergos are amazing. It does have a neutral ergo, or neutral ergos to it. So if you're going in the reverse cut, this direction, any direction, even if you're like this, remember, this doesn't bother you. You can, you know, there's so many grips to it, and it's, like I said, very neutral. Now, the blade. Let's talk about cutting, and then we'll talk about taking this thing apart and what, you know, I think about the pivot system. So, the cutting, man, this thing cuts pretty doggone good. Between 18 and 20 thousandths behind the edge. So, it does have a nice, strong, durable edge. But, you know, it's got a relatively tall flat grind, and with all the leverage you get behind the cuts, the ergos are so comfortable. It's you get a lot of leverage in your cuts, and it cuts really well. Now, the cardboard I'm showing in this video cutting right now is lightweight cardboard. It's relatively easy to cut, period. So through some really denser materials, yeah, you might get a little bit more struggle, but with all the leverage you have in the handle, you're not going to have a problem cutting with this thing. It cuts great, and for a work knife, it's going to be a great tool for anybody who needs you know, a solid knife. Now, the utility cuts, same thing. It does have a nice, strong, durable, yet very acute tip. So no problems with utility cuts. It's going to work for just about whatever you need, especially with this beautiful drop point blade. A very, very useful blade shape. It does work really well for just about whatever you're going to use it for, this type of blade shape. You know, it's very versatile. Now, talking about the clip really quick before we take this thing apart. The clip is a titanium clip. Yeah, titanium spring clip. It is a deep carry clip. No, the screws are not inset, but they did not get in the way whatsoever. Yes, my pants are all tore up. My work pants are all tore up from clips that suck, but this is not one of them. This clip works great, even with the you know, the G10, as scratchy as it is, which is not really that scratchy, but as textured as it is, this thing works great and out of the pocket. And I kind of like the blue stripe it has down the middle. Some people might not like it. I think it's pretty cool. Now, the other version with the blacked out clip is a stainless steel. It's not titanium like this one, and it is a little bit more tighter. So you do get a little bit more resistance against this texture, but it'd be very easy to put something on, just wedge like some paper or something underneath there overnight and, you know, break it in just a little bit if you really wanted to. Otherwise, you know, it's a fine clip. It does work just fine. This one just has a little less tension on it, being titanium, so this one is a lot better in and out of the pocket. But this one's not bad, and like I said, it'd be very easy to adjust it if you wanted to. Now, let's talk about taking this thing apart before we get into the bad. So, taking this thing apart came apart really easily. It does have a captured pivot, and taking it apart, you can really see how solid it is, man. I mean, like I said, it has nice big hardware, T8s all the way around. Nice big stop pin, nice big backspacer. You know, everything is put together very solid. Everything went together really nice and came apart really easily. And, you know, you can really appreciate that on a knife, how easily it is to take apart and put back together. After getting it apart, I noticed that they're using the plastic ceramic caged bearings on this thing, which is awesome. I'm happy to see that. Plastic caged bearings. I like those type of bearings. So then, you know, you can see the, you know, the cutout on the blade. It has a detent track and everything. But when we get to these little notches that I'm talking about, that for some reason they're smooth as Kizers. And listen, I'm not saying that their other Kizers aren't incredibly smooth, because they are. But for some reason, the ones that have this little notch are even smoother. They're ridiculously smooth. They're smooth on another level. So this is what I think. This is just my opinion. I don't know if this is, I'm pretty sure this is the thing, is that they start the pivot at the farthest point. So basically all the weight is towards the blade. So when you unlock it, since the pivot is as far down or far to the end of the ricasso you could get, as far to the edge as you can get. Plus those little notches also remove a little bit more steel, which also remove a little bit more weight on the opposite end of the edge. It makes it to where when you unlock it, all the weight is in the blade. So like I don't know, kind of like a pendulum or something, it just swings. So it makes it, when you have ceramic bearings and you have the cutouts for the ceramic bearings to spin in, they have a nice flat polished surface. That's another thing. The surface area is polished. Now I did see there was a little tiny burr around where the pivot goes through, but that's not bothering anything. It's not hurting anything. It does show a little bit that could have been knocked down, but it's not hurting anything. So the surface where the bearings roll are nice and polished, and then you have all the weight on the blade side of the blade, I guess you could say. And so when you do unlock it, it makes it incredibly smooth. Incredibly smooth. And also when you break that detent, it makes it kick out. So yeah, I'm loving their new pivot and bearing system. The way they're doing it, it seems to work very nicely. And this thing, after putting it back together, everything went back together, back to centered. Barely any, I didn't have to adjust anything. All I did was I screwed all the screws in nice and tight, and then I backed the pivot slightly out, like a quarter turn, and perfectly centered. The action was great. Everything, it just went back together so perfectly. And the detent is super strong, like in a good way. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but no play, any direction. It feels like a very solid overbuilt knife. Talking about the N690 steel, I like N690. It's easy to sharpen. It holds a good edge. It's very stain resistant. It's plenty tough for a knife like this, and it's easy to sharpen, like I said, and easy to maintain. And if you're not good at sharpening, you should at least have a honing rod and strop. You might not necessarily need a strop as big as the one I'm showing right here. You could use a small one. It doesn't matter. Just have a strop and then some sort of ceramic honing rod. Just very, very lightly rub your edge at an angle on each side on the ceramic rod, and then strop, and you can keep your edge going for a long time, especially with a steel like N690. It's going to have great results from a strop and hone. So you'd be surprised how long you can keep an edge going with stropping and honing. But all in all, though, if I was gonna label any bad things, the one thing is the screws right here. I wish they were inset and flat. That's one thing. The next thing, like I said, when I took it apart, around the pivot area did have a little burr. Not a big deal. It doesn't hurt anything, but it's still there. Next thing, this flipper tab, it turns up. So it kind of doesn't feel good when you're like this, so when I do push cuts, I don't really mind it because I go right over the top of it like that. And, the push cuts felt good because all the pressure is going towards the spine into your hand when you're push cutting. But I don't know, it looks a little weird. And for my finger, it's a little weird spot right there. It would have been nice if they somehow could have just, I don't know, straightened it out or something, just so you didn't have this little circle right there. But next thing, the plunge grind. I wish the plunge grind was a little bit better. It does almost come all the way down to the edge. It's like to about right there. Not that big of a deal. You can always cut in another choil or a finger choil, or, just when you get to that point and you've sharpened a lot of steel off of the knife, you can easily add a choil in without an issue. So, so all my things about this thing are straight nitpicks. it's a good knife. It's a solid knife. It works great. It's good cutter, good user. And, you know, it's not, I guess some people might say it's a little heavy, but to me, it's a tool. It's not trying to be your lightweight gent carry EDC. This is trying to be a user. So in that case, I think that's awesome. I don't mind the weight whatsoever. I think the weight is just fine on a tough knife like this. And that's what it is. It is a work knife. It is a tough knife. It's a knife that you're not, you know, you can carry onto a construction site, you know, and it's going to be a great tool, or anywhere, into a factory or wherever. So I know I definitely took it to work a few days. So there you guys go. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.